What is this thing called analog tape? Chances are a lot of you know about this, or you wouldn't be here, or it's you've read something about it. Now, been a big resurgence in this, and I have to credit and thank the Tape Project, Doc Bottlehead, and Paul Stubblebine, who have done, I don't know if you are aware, how many of you guys folks know about the Tape Project, or know about what? All right, I'll certainly be talking about that. Thing I have to say, this really got this going, and they have done one heck of a job. What a class project, class act that they've done in putting this thing together. It's expensive, but I'll tell you, some of the tapes and that thing, we're lucky to be able to have them at any price. It's my own feeling. Okay, Tape Project has reissued over the past couple of years. I think they've got maybe 15. I don't know if they have 20 titles yet. They're issuing it in 10.5-inch large reels playing at 15 IPS. I want to talk about what you need to get the best playback out of this stuff. Okay, a basic outline of what I'm going to talk about is this. Just so you can see that I do not read my slides. Sorry. Let me do a little bit of a poll. How many of you would be considered newbies into this that don't know too much about this? And the reason I'm asking that, please don't, I want to make sure I define terms, talk about stuff that some of you may not know about or appreciate or whatever, like, can I play both sides of the tape? The answer is no. This may sound like a silly question, but I just had a buddy of mine that just kind of getting started in this. I left him a bunch of tapes, and he got back to me and he said, you know, that Count Basie dub that you let me take, all of a sudden it sounds awfully dull. And it got me thinking about it, and it had to do with when he went to thread it, turned the tape around 180 degrees. So now he was playing the shiny side, the binder side, or the thing. And where went the highs? You were that much further away from the tape head, the highs just went to hell. Sounds simple, it's something, but then I realized, oh, yeah, I think I've done that once or twice in my life. So we'll come back to a lot of that. Very simple statement. Why analog tape? Best available analog reproduction. I'm not going to stand here and really justify that. Those of you who have listened to it and have had, you know, the setups, and some of my customers and my clients will never have sent back to me, you know, this beats vinyl in most every respect. It should, and I want to make sure that I kind of qualify this. As we all know, let's realize when stereo started, when mono really got going in reproduction, all of the original recording sessions, they were originally mastered on analog tape. This started, like I said, 1950, stereos 1953, 54 for tape. Up through the 80s, when, what was it, PCM1s on all this kind of stuff, that's when the digital revolution got going from a mastering. Of course, we get into the 60s, 65, they started going into multi-track. So all of a sudden, we weren't recording everybody in one room at one time and whatever. They were laying down individual tracks. Anywhere up to 2 inches, 24 tracks, all that type of stuff. But the point is, it was still done on analog tape. Then how did you get it? Well, we got it with discs, and I like to think, to me, it's an awfully kind of, I would even use the word a Byzantine process of how did we get there? Well, we took the original production, dubbed it how many times we needed to get it down to the recording master, and then inscribed a groove on a record, and then made a copy of that, the master, all this type of stuff. And then you get the record. We punch them out on plastic or whatever. You buy the record, you put it on your turntable, you play it on a thing. I mean, just to get back to that electrical thing, it's amazing, and it's a tribute to me that LP sounds as good as it does, to be perfectly honest with you. So I think, well, look, why couldn't we if we could actually get that master tape and somehow get a dub just maybe a couple generations down from that, how marvelous that tape might sound. And that's what Tape Project is trying to do. So we've got the best sound. I've also found, a number of my clients have found it's kind of a new challenge. As I said, they've either conquered Phono or given up, and they just want something new to do. Now, we're going to be discussing reproduction, not recording. I haven't done. I've tried doing some recording. There's a dubbing process, all this and that. We can talk about that offline or talk about that later. I'd be more than happy Discussion is going to be limited. What we're pretty much talking from a home reproduction thing is 2-track, quarter-inch tape. Some of the guys I'm finding out in tape projects, some of the folks, there's been a call for them to actually try to do this in 1/2 inch. And they're apparently going to, for $1,000 a title, they're going to do 1/2 inch. Have a ball. I'm not going to be discussing cassettes and 4-track. Actually, I'm going to be mentioning 4-tracks when it comes to availability of tape. But the primary thing is going to be 2-track, kind of the 15-inch stuff. All right. Now, I'm going to be making, talk about myself for 3 minutes. About what this is my current, this is 2 or 3 of my current things. I have a MCI transport. By the way, I'll mention MCI uses Bogan heads, wonderful heads, wired out to my preamp. I've got showing a Stella box up there and some. In real life. Oh, where did that come from? Yeah. There's a Stella box. That's one I brought with me. We're going to be listening to that tonight. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be making some comments about the sonics of what I'm hearing between some of this different stuff. And I think just to be fair to me, it's not going to help enhance my credibility because that's already shot as it is. This is my home system. I've got quads. I built up a center channel. I'm an inveterate DIYer. I built up a center channel quad woofer, 4-panel, solid state amplification, 100 hertz on down. Amplification, and I'll just go that far with it. I found that the, at least with quads, I've tried all kinds of tubes, and I found that hybrid solid state, I'm using an old Lazarus 50-watt channels Class A stereo amp, and it does a really, I modified that too. It does a really nice job of modifying this system. So I just want to give you an idea of, when I say quads, kind of the stuff that I listen for. In order to, I want to get into what I'm going to call the 3 parts to a tape system and their phono equivalents, because I know a lot of you who, if you're not necessarily familiar with the tape stuff, you're certainly familiar with the phono stuff. Transport, same thing as a turntable tone arm, tape head, phono cartridge, tape preamp, phono preamp. I want to talk about, I'm going to keep this as simple as possible, components that move and play the tape. Every tape deck that I've seen, you put the full load of tape or the tape you're going to play, you put it on the left-hand side, tape is drawn from left to right onto a take-up reel. There are various ways that the tape is supported before it enters the head block, before it goes through the, in this case, I'm talking about the playback head. Of course, all good tape recorders now, or tape recorders will have the 3 heads, a separate erase, a separate record, a separate play. The better recorders, especially when you get into the commercial things, they'll have a little flutter roller. It's a little roller on, in some cases, ruby bearings, so when it turns, it doesn't move at all, and the tape is passed over that just before it gets to the playback head. It's trying to dampen any mechanical vibrations that the rest of the system may induce just before it goes by the playback head. You typically only see these on the commercial machines. Okay, what is the transport supposed to do? And I say what its primary purpose here is. It's pulling the tape by the head. It's trying not to do anything to, it's not trying to bring in any mechanical vibration or any electrical vibration. Wow and flutter primarily. Same thing you can conceivably get in a turntable if it speeds up, slows down, either slowly or quickly. There were, if you go look into this, I'm saying there were a few generations of transports. Your early Ampexes, there were really no motion sensing implied in that thing. You've got to be very, very careful. I love Ampex. They're wonderful sounding machines. You've got to be very careful with the way they handle tape. You can snap a tape in an instant on an Ampex. I always say if you want to use an Ampex, don't try and shuttle the tape. Don't move it back and forth. Put the tape on the reel, rewind it, play it all the way through. Just be very, very careful if you try and shuttle the tape because it's got these big clunky brakes and gigantic motors. Later machines, especially in the consumer market, they started putting in tape sensing. So let's say you're rewinding and by mistake you hit play, it stops rewinding and it won't do anything else until it senses that the tape starts. Then it starts playing. In the highest technology in these tapes got into, were probably in the professional use, mainly incorporated for editing, where they went to servo systems, where the tape can be actually shuttled back and forth. If you want to find a location on a tape for editing, you can press 0 when the parts you want, play the tape, press return to 0. It goes right back to where you wanted to start. You could cut the tape and go from there, start editing it. Also, those machines were also designed to try, any time the tape was in motion, it was under constant tension, even under fast forward and fast rewind, so that they would try to keep the tape as mechanically as in good shape as they possibly could. I've had a lot of old reel-to-reel, the old, I used to collect this stuff, had 400 or 500 at one time of the 2 tracks and whatever. A lot of the tapes that you may find, depending upon, I mean, you're the second or third or who knows how many generation owner, these tapes may not have been stored very well. They may not have been necessarily played on very, very good machines. They can have physical imperfections. One thing is called cupping, or they can have been stretched or some other type of thing. If you want to try and find and collect some of these tapes, certain machines seem to be able to play them better than others. Some of it has to do with the way that the tape is tensioned or before it enters and leaves the head block area. I've just found, for example, that the Stolovox can play tapes that I can put on other machines and they just won't play. The worst thing that you'll hear is what I call image wander. If the tape isn't really lying flat against the head, you'll hear the image go back and forth. And the worse is if it actually will start lifting away from the head as it's playing, you'll hear the highs drop in and out. You may not get total dropouts, but of course your highs are the shortest wavelengths. So if the tape starts coming away from the head in any way, shape, or form, you're gonna lose the highs first. First you'll lose the image because the phasing between the channels will vary, but then you'll start losing the highs. Final thing is, and this is awfully important, you're going to be getting these tapes. They can be, first of all, they can be irreplaceable in some manner if you've got very, very good dubs or stuff like that. They're certainly going to probably be kind of expensive. You want to store them as best possible. There's this thing called tails out. Now the idea is with tails out is you take your tape, and the way is you'll rewind it over to the left-hand side, and then you play it all the way through. When it's finished playing, you take it off the tape recorder, put a piece of tape on the outside to keep it going, and you store it in that manner. Reason you do that, now you've played it at slow speed. It's probably laying very, very nicely on the take-up reel. It's under relatively constant tension. You put it away that way, and you store it in relatively, a constant temperature, not too cold, not too hot, and relatively dry. I was thinking about this morning. I said, treat it like you would the family cat. But and you put this stuff away, store it vertically. You shouldn't lay it down. This is some of the decks. I guess it's Studer has something called library wind, which is apparently a medium speed wind and stuff like that. That's wonderful. But I think if if you don't have a deck like that that can conceivably do that, store the deck after you've played it. So that when you go to play it again, you put it on the right-hand reel, you rewind it all the way, play it, enjoy it, put it away. I was going to put down here this last bullet from a transport perspective, and I'll just mention this very, very quickly. If you have one, or you get somebody calls up and said, "Hey, I've got somebody that has an XYZ machine, and you're really thinking of it, go to check it out." I use the idea of a sacrificial type because you go over there, you don't know necessarily that the brakes may not be set right, whatever. Don't bring a really good tape because you put the thing on, you hit fast forward, you hit stop, and snap. And you tape this thing, and it's stuff spooling all over because, I don't know, the supply reel brake doesn't work. Okay, so just think of bringing along what I call a sacrificial reel and to check out all the physical motion, and does it seem to be starting and stopping, and does it slow down nicely from fast forward or fast rewind, slow down nicely. It doesn't, it doesn't bunch up the tape. It doesn't seem to stretch the tape too much. That kind of stuff. Now, recommendations. And problem is there are an awful lot of very, very good transports, I think. And you don't necessarily, I happen to love, and I'll mention this. Oh, here was another question I meant. How many of you folks are do-it-yourselfers? that would be willing to, okay, this is great. There's a tremendous DIY opportunity in tape that I'll be mentioning as we go through this. The only thing is, of course, is that now we know with the DIY, you guys may be, or you folks may be in with, you know, building and modifying amplifiers and stuff. You get into this, you have to have a little mechanical acumen in here and be able to, how to adjust a brake and all this and that. All of this stuff, the manuals are available for. You don't need a lot of sophisticated stuff. In some cases, you don't even need spring gauges. You can go in and just adjust stuff till it seems to be operating right using your sacrificial tape. Studers. A lot of folks love the nameplate, love what's on the nameplate. If you like the Studers, you can afford them. Be my guest, they're absolutely wonderful machines. The Studer A80 is probably the Ne Plus Ultra of the Studers, but let me tell you, there are a lot of other wonderful, wonderful Studers. Most Ampexes, some of their solid state stuff is not, what is it, AG600, some of that other kind of stuff. It's their later models, they're really pro machines, but some of their, I guess maybe let me take that back. All of their machines probably are quite good from a transport perspective. The electronics that are in them may not necessarily be the best. Technics 1500, that's been a darling deck that a lot of the folks have, and it is a wonderful transport deck. I do have to say that. It handles tape wonderfully. I don't think I've ever found one that was really broken or that matter were much out of adjustment. I mean, they're really kind of a plug-and-play kind of a transport deck. They're really, really nice. MX5050 is another one, and I probably left off on certain brands. I happen to love the Revox. I'll be coming back. The Revox H77, B787, PR99, they're a wonderful starter deck. They really, really are. Tape heads. If you do the kind of look into this, originally the companies started making tape recorders, had to make tape heads mainly because no one else was making them. Ampex, certainly Studer in Germany, things of that nature. Later on, there were tape head only manufacturers. In the United States, the most well-known is Nortronics. They're a Minneapolis-based company that made thousands of different types of tape heads, all different formats and tape sizes and all this type of stuff. It turns out that I think their pro heads and even some of their consumer heads sound very, very, very good. Bogen Wilke, something like that. The German. I think the Japanese. I haven't really done a lot of research on this. It's my guess that probably all the Japanese tape machine companies probably used heads from maybe one company, maybe one or two companies. I'm guessing that. I haven't looked at it. Now, I've heard differences. I've taken the time to listen to on my system between different tape heads, and I do hear differences. And it's, in a way, might be considered surprising because it's so simple compared to a phono cartridge. You don't have all that mechanical and the cantilever and all that other type of stuff. It only ought to be a coil of wire. I mean, some type of a C lamination with a coil of wire wound around it. I have heard differences. And the differences that I've heard, they're not tonal, they're not dynamics. I can only ascribe it as loss of information. On an orchestral recording, I don't hear in some of the instruments, I don't hear the harmonic structure in there, I don't hear it placed as well on the sound stage as I have. I have my own thoughts that might have to do, it could be the thickness of the laminations, the type of material they use, the heat annealing, the annealing process, you know, some of the physics and the manufacturing processes that were used. I haven't heard a Japanese head that can't be bettered by an Nortronics or a German head. That's my own feeling. I don't necessarily want to go into, there are some of the highly rated current heads that might be available that I think can be better. This is my own thing by actually taking time and listening to it on my system. Now let's get into the electronics, the third part. Okay. Tape preamp is extremely similar to a phono preamp, and it should be because a tape head looks just like, from an electrical perspective, looks very, very similar to a magnetic phono cartridge. You need about the same amount of decibel, you know, it's in the millivolts, 1 to 5 millivolt range, so to get it up to a volt, you need about 50 dB of gain, which is what a typical phono preamp, a moving magnet, phono preamp will give you. Frequency response is different because, okay, you know, in phonoland we have RIAA. We have that pre-equalization that's done that when you play the record back and it goes through your preamp, you get a post-equalization that goes this way, and the bottom line is you're supposed to get a nice flat response. What they came up with tape was actually a bit of a simpler equalization, pre-equalization, post-equalization system called, in the United States it was NAB, National Association of Broadcaster, or in Europe, IEC. Don't ask me what that means. There's also another one. It's IEC / something else, but it's the same. It's actually the same curve, okay, versus RIAA. And in fact, as I put in here, that's basically the only difference between the two, between a phono preamp and a tape preamp is in the equalization, and it's literally just a couple of different components in that feedback network. Biggest sonic problems I've heard between tape recorders or tape, from reproduction perspective, in the electronics, and I think a number of the other folks that have tried this will back me up. In some cases, there's a good reason for it, in that a lot of the professional tape recorders had to be able to switch between different speeds and IEC and whatever, and they put in FET switches and various, you know, fairly complex schemes to be able to do that. Affects the sound. The other thing, you take Nagra. I looked at the Nagra reproduce chain. There's, I think, 8 op amps in a chain in that thing, and these are not high quality. I mean, they were at the time, any 5534s or whatever, pretty good op amps, but there's just a lot of stuff on there. Solution: replace the stock electronics with what I call it outboard electronics. In order to do that, you have to wire out the reproduction head, which I'll talk about in a little while. Doc Bottlehead has his 2 or 3 different preamps. There's a few here. Manly, the Manly Labs made a really nice phono tape preamp with a bunch of different adjustments. De Havilland, Kara's here up in, I'll tell you what room it is. She has her brand new little tape preamp. It's here, you can go listen to that. Aria is what, oh boy, who does, the Ampex Electronics, the Ampex deck. What's that? Mike Spitz. Mike Spitz, I guess, also they have an offshoot, and they make plug-in electronics that replaces the stock Ampex Electronics. And then there's mine. I'm going to say KC King Cello. I'm not going to say any more about it than that. Now, and this is what I love. If you old-timers or folks into this, all of your first-generation tube preamps had tape head inputs, as did, I guess you could say, all of the previous generation, the last generation mono-only preamps had tape inputs. And they had a, when you switched, you could go between phono would be RIAA, or when you went to the tape position, it would be NAB. You could wire out a head, get yourself an old Fisher, Scott, Marantz, Mac, Pilot, whatever. Try plugging it in there and see what you come up with. I've mentioned this on some of the forums, and I don't know anybody that's actually tried it. I'll bet you get some beautiful, if it has to be tubes, get some beautiful playback out of that. The Marantz 7 actually had a high frequency adjust control in the top there, so you could actually dial your high frequency, your 10 kilohertz right on if you have the test tape to be able to do that. Or please feel free to use your ears. Okay, how do you get into this? I kind of said from some of my old financial stuff, there's I call it a top-down way. You can go get a Mike Spitz recorder. Here we have, there's J-Corder is here. They'll sell you a complete recorder, or United Home Audio. They'll sell you a complete recorder off the shelf. We're talking, based on the prices I saw today, somewhere between $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, $12,000. I guess a Mike Spitz deck all set up with RE electronics is up around 20. Middle of the road, you could somehow get, or you could go to somebody that will get a deck, put a deck together for you. Get someone else that'll do the electronics, put it together, or you can do it yourself. And here's what I wanted to say. I put in red here. It's not necessarily plug and play, and there's a bit of a caveat that I'll get into. You're going to do the tape head. You get yourself what you think is a better tape head and install it now or into a mechanical alignment and stuff like that. There's a bit of work involved. I can talk to you about that. It's not necessarily rocket science. A lot of it you can do by eye. Although when you get to the final stuff, some of your azimuth and some of your high frequency adjustment, it does help to have test tapes and some way to, you know, like something, a dB meter or a modern VOM that you can look at the output and play the frequency response test tones on the tape and make sure that everything's nice and flat. Wire out the existing head. Shielded cable out to RCAs, a meter of decent cable. Some folks are adding switches up near the head block or somewhere where you can actually switch the output from the head to your output, to your external cable, or back into the stock electronics, so you can just flip the switch, A, B. Another thing is I should mention for the 4-track folks is that if you have the ability, if there's a 4-track head already in there, or there's room in the head stack to add a 1/4-track head, you can put that in and have the switch select between 1/2-track and 1/4-track if you want to get into collecting the 1/4-track stuff. All right. Now you can add or modify the reproduction electronics. Then you have to align everything. As I said, the frequency response, do it really right. I mean, feel free to use your ears. Nothing wrong with these things. Or if you have the test tapes, you can set the high frequency adjustment. The azimuth of the head, which is, you know, your tape is going this way, is that if the head is a little bit one way or the other, you're going to get you're going to get a phasing problem. That's what azimuth is really trying to do, is get you the minimal phase difference between channels. I happen to love A77, B77, or the PR90, that whole series of consumer decks, wonderful decks. They do a really good, decent job of handling tape, and the heads on them are very, very good. So if you want to start as a DIYer, get yourself a high-speed 1/2-track machine, maybe wire the heads out, have a ball playing with the electronics or whatever. The stock electronics on those machines is not very good. They use tantalum, early tantalum coupling capacitors. You can go through and change out the caps, and you can just without necessarily changing the electronics, you can make the sound of a stock deck sound much, much better. Just see if you like it. See what it's like to get tapes, start playing them, see if you really get hooked, which unfortunately you probably will, and then who knows where you're going to go with this stuff.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
When you say sounds better, it's by ears, by your personal listening sound?
Yeah, those things, these things right here, yeah. No, I'm saying, you know, the high frequency response, typically the adjustment, the stuff that needs the most adjusting in a playback amplifier is the high frequencies. Okay, so you can just play the thing and just, you know, does it sound too bright? If it sounds too bright, turn it down. If it sounds a little dull, turn it up.
I have 3 PR99, and before I'll die, maybe I'm on.
There's the high, that's what, the PR99's underneath. You've got the little, there's their high frequency adjustments.
But my question, sounds better to you, it means measurement or by ears?
Oh, on my ears.
I see.
Totally going by my.
It's more musical or better high frequency?
Let me. I'm going to talk about the. The tape you folks all have to get, if you don't have it, if you're really going to get into this, is the Arnold Overture's tape project tape. That I call that as a system analysis tool. It is one hell of a tape, but it is. I would use the word bright, but it's bright from the fact that it's got a lot of brass in there, and it's recorded. It's to a degree in your face. It's bright. I mean, it ain't the electronics. It's just it's the way it was recorded. Some people find on some of the systems, depending upon the speakers you have and everything like that, might sound a little harsh. Turn down the high frequencies a little bit. See what it does to the sound. That's okay. Tapes. This is the Achilles heel of this whole deal. Is not a lot. I mean, there never were a lot of stuff available, certainly compared to records. Tape Project. They have 15, 20 titles out. It spans there's classical, there's jazz, there's blues, there's rock. They started issuing some pretty decent rock. All done wonderfully well. The Arnold Overtures, I have to come back to that. The best transcription I've ever heard. They got the brass right. They got the bite of the trumpets, the trombones, the whole thing. The bass drum, the thwack of the drum, the whole thing. The strings sound wonderful. The spatial I guess it was Kingsway Hall or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. It was done in England. It's just got, and I've heard, and before I really got into this and some of the preamp work I've done, now I know, I think I know what now air is and what black back, you know, some of these terms that get bandied about in the thing, what they actually mean. You get instruments popping out of just a black background and the walls, everything that you could, you know, they talk about in a lot of the recording. It's there on that recording. It really, really is. Yes, sir.
Who originally did that recording?
That was a reference recording. If I'm not Keith Johnson. Keith Johnson recorded that King's, and I believe it's Arnold, Malcolm Arnold, conducting the London Symphony or something like that. So one heck of a. By the way, I checked with Eileen. Tape project has 39 copies left. So when you get home, you might want to order the thing. And when it's gone, I didn't realize this thing, but you know, when a lot of these things, they have a license to get. They can make basically it isn't so many of the quality. They can only issue it for a certain period of time, and when that's up, they've got to stop. They've got to stop doing it.
What speeds and sizes of tape are available from that?
It's all 15 IPs, 10.5-inch reels. Each release is 2 tapes. So you're effectively getting the whole record. You're getting 45 minutes of something. Okay. Then we get into commercial pre-records. Now, 2-track stereo. Stereo tapes preceded the records by 3 or 4 years. I don't think the first LPs came out till 56, 57. Audiosphere issued the first. Of course, they were binaural back then, which is a little bit different. Anyway, 1953 to 1960. Then, of course, there were 4-tracks. I don't want to belittle 4-tracks. There were a number of wonderful 4-tracks. Problem is with a lot of the 4-tracks, well, of course, you've got the reduced track width, so your signal-to-noise ratio isn't as good. They were also pretty much high-speed duped. High-speed duplicated. A lot of the 2-tracks were done 1-to-1. They didn't. The commercial reality wasn't there then. They didn't develop have a lot of knowledge or use of high-speed duplication. That's why a lot of these sound so good. But they're old. A lot of these were done on acetate. Early acetate, the red, what do they call it? Red whatever, the red acetate that a lot of your early RCAs, some of the living stereos came out on. Okay. Then for some of you that really do a lot of digging and get lucky, as I have been, you could try to find collections of masters or master dubs. They show up on eBay now and then. I did want to put down Irvington Music. There's another source of some of these. A couple of other areas that I think should be mentioned is if you get into this, undoubtedly you're going to come across the sticky tapes or sticky shed. That was a binder problem. That was the glue that held all the magnetic particles onto the plastic backing. And the wives' tale, I'm sorry, I should use old wives' tales. The story that I heard was that originally they were using part of the glue and actually a bit of a lubrication. They were using whale oil. And come along the consumer, whatever the thing, they said can't use whale oil anymore, so they went to another compound, which they didn't realize until 20 years later would dry off and actually come off on the, well, doesn't come off on the tape, it would get deposited on all your heads and everything as you try to play the tape. I've had sticky tapes where I'll start the tape, I'll go away, and all of a sudden I don't hear any music anymore. I'll come back and the tape is glued to the heads and everything like that. It's so sticky, it's such a binding thing that it'll actually overcome the torque of the motors. And you just got to kind of peel it away and spend the next half hour trying to clean everything off of these heads, which is not a fun thing. The whole idea, if you have tapes that can do this, there's this thing called baking. You can bake the tapes, which is literally can put them in an oven and whatever, which is a very temporary way. You could maybe play them nicely for a week or two or whatever, and then they start sticking again. What everybody is doing with these is they're getting these tapes so that they're, transferring the digital or some other thing like that, just because it's after a while. It's a shame. Problem is that a lot of the rock, a lot of this other stuff, and I have another slide that talks about, remind me to get back to Dolby and noise reduction. But if you get into, I probably don't have to talk about, I'll come back to all of this. The diameter, the commercial stuff was pretty much 7-inch reels. The Pro was 10 and a half in some cases 12, 14 inch, varying widths anyway from 1/4 up to 2 inch, varying thicknesses, different tracks, all of this, and then the idea of cartridges and cassettes. But I did do, this is for this other talk that I do, is in the early 50s, RCA, Mercury, no, I don't know Mercury, but certainly Columbia, had a bunch of monotapes that you could get, and it's some phenomenal performances on that. You know, some of the earlier, some classic performances. Then we got into half-track. I've compiled a list that I did, and it's available on one of the sites that I'll show you. Apparently, there were about in the 2-track stereo era, there were about 90 different labels. I mean, there were labels popping out all over the place, releasing. In some cases, they might have released one tape, and that was all they ever did. But there were about 2,300 titles released in that period of time. 80% of them, you can see the spread here. There's no rock. This all preceded, you know, 1960 was, you know, we're into 58, so we're into Buddy Holly, just the beginning of all this kind of stuff. There's no rock on 2-track, unfortunately. You want to get some good rock performances, you have to look to 4-track. I'm going to just display this tape on master tapes and dubs and stuff like that and let you read it and whatever. And the whole idea of the dubbing process, you get a master dub, you really, there's really no way, there's no, how many dubs it is away from the master. And a lot of this stuff, the folks that have it, whatever, you just get it, you listen to it, and you see if you like it, and see if they'll offer a return policy if you don't like it. Oh, in the early generations, if you know you have a really early tape, there's a lot of the ones, they all started out with a bunch of test tones. And the whole idea of that is that, you know, now you could make sure you could adjust the response on your machine to match the response of the machine that originally recorded it. Of course, the other thing that I had on the other slide, and I want to mention the idea, was that another thing was Dolby, or different was in the middle 70s or stuff, you know, Dolby A came out, and that was a revolution, and everybody, especially I was going to say a lot of the European tapes went to Dolby A encoding on a lot of this stuff. Depending upon if you should find masters or master dubs, they may be Dolby A encoded, and now you got to get yourself a Dolby A decoder, and there were a couple of generations. There was the one with a Cat 22. There was the big clunker machine. What was the early one? The one A301, which was the early one, and then they actually shrunk it down and got it all, you know, from yay by yay to yay by yay, 19-inch rack. But they do sound different. I've got a buddy that I upgraded both of them for him, and he really likes the earliest one because he came up with a bunch of master dubs or masters that were all Dolby A encoded. Dolby B, you get into your 1/4-track Barclay Crocker, that kind of stuff. They were all Dolby B. All Dolby B encoders had to have the same circuitry on them because that was prescribed by Ray Dolby. The way you implement it and the quality of the parts is a different story. A lot of your old Advents, the coupling capacitors in there really aren't that great. If you're going to start getting that and you really want to get what I would call the best in reproduction, is you want to think about you know, trying to go through that and put in, you know, especially in the coupling caps, getting those better, or having somebody do that for you to really optimize those. Because some of those Barclay Crockers are just dynamite. Then I remembered the other day there was a company out of New Jersey called Direct-to-Tape Recording. I don't know if any of you ever heard of that, but they were, this is probably 20 years ago, 15 years ago, they went out of business, but they had, they would make up the tape for you depending upon the format you wanted. They had the masters, and when you ordered it, you could get half-track or whatever, and this and that. It was kind of interesting. Here's some resources. There's a couple of different chat rooms where us folks lurk, and there's a specific reel-to-reel chat room. Actually, there's 2 of them on Yahoo groups. There's the reel-to-reel, and then I think there's another one called Reel Tapes, which is just about the tapes. This is a lot of the stuff, it's folks that are just getting into it, and they're asking a question about this. My X doesn't seem to work right, or it doesn't sound right. What do I do? And there's a lot of folks on there that have been very, very helpful in answering questions along those lines. Audio Asylum has a tape trail. There's tapeheads.net. There's a relatively new forum called What's Best. Somewhat pretentious because they want it, well, what can I say? They're in all different aspects of hi-fi or audiophile stuff, and what do they feel is the best of different types of equipment and whatever in their discussions of this and that. There's other ones. There's tape op, there's, excuse me, gear sluts. There's all kinds of these little forums that I understand or that I see people come across from time to time. Then, of course, there's the different professional forums. I guess there's a one devoted to Ampex and one devoted to Studer. There's this kind of stuff. Exactly how you get there, I guess I'd suggest just go do some searches if that's the way you wish to do it, and then just see what you can come up with. Oh, I just put this down as miscellaneous thing because I don't want to necessarily spend a lot of time on this and whatever, but the maintenance compared to phono maintenance is a breeze. You get these decks, if you look at the way the tape path was set up in here, and especially your pro decks, these things are rock solid. You'd have to drop a deck from 10 feet onto a piece of concrete to really get much out of alignment. Okay. So, and this is, to me, this is the good news. If you get a deck, you know it's an alignment and whatever, you may never have to do anything to it again. I mean, these things are rock solid, except clean the heads. And somebody was asking that, how often should I clean a set? I say, you go to play a tape, if you go do it, look at the heads. You'll see pretty much your heads are shiny, stainless, whatever it is. You can easily see any dirt or stuff that's on there. And if you see anything, you take a Q-tip and isopropyl alcohol and just clean it off. Same thing, I use isopropyl alcohol too on the pinch rollers. I haven't any problem with it adversely affecting my pinch rollers. All right. Demagnetize the heads. I do it every time I finished working with a machine because electrical impulses to the head, you can magnetize it. But under normal operation, I've never come across or seen anything or heard anything that would indicate to me that we've got a magnetized head. Some of the folks think you've got to do it on a regular basis. I don't. Again, I think if you do something to the deck or if you're plugging or unplugging something where there might be an electrical pulse get into the head that could conceivably magnetize it in some manner. But I think that's overrated. Alignment, head, and all this stuff, now we're getting into where you might need an alignment tape and some other kind of stuff to be able to do that. That's kind of like an advanced topic, and if you're really into this and you feel like you have to do this so we can get there, I mentioned the noise reduction. Finally, I can't believe I'm doing this in an hour. Okay, I'm going to be available tonight. I mean, I could be available maybe now. Buy me a drink. We're going to be up in the audio note room, 501 at 7 o'clock for about an hour. And I've got my Stolovox. A friend of mine, Rich, we brought along some nice tapes and dubs and stuff like that. We can play those. You can, if you haven't had an opportunity to hear what some of this stuff can sound like, stop by. I think you'll really fall in love. Any questions, I'll be more than happy to help you out with them. Any decks, any recommendations, any of that type of stuff. United Home Audio, I think they're there in 20 and 21. They're actually playing some tape project tapes. I brought along the Arnold Overtures, whether we get to play it or not. We got some really neat rock stuff that just found. Tape product and Bottlehead. They're supposed to be in the audio salon room. That was listed on one of the websites. I'm not necessarily sure where the audio salon room is, but that's neither. Oh, and then Kara Chafee has her new preamp up in 9014. Her brand name is de Havilland. Nice little preamp that she has. And Jay Corder is here in room 529 with their all-in-one units. So.
Two other rooms also. Magico has
Okay.
9022.
Okay.
I think that's the tape project's supposed to be.
and also Nick Doshi,
Okay.
right across from me.
So we have a couple minutes, and I want to thank you very, very much. This is trouble is you get into this stuff and you get to listen to it, and it's
Not healthy.
not healthy. Thank you very much. It can get very, very expensive.
Can you put that previous slide back up?
And I'll be around. I'll be around now. I guess we have 15 minutes to the. Oh no! Wait a minute. We got plenty of time till the next. So if there are any specific questions, I mean, if you want to, you can shout them out now. And yes.
Is the reason that you store tape tails out to prevent pre-echo from bleed through?
See, I got to get up here. I can't hear. That's why I got into audio.
Is the reason you store tape tails out to prevent pre-echo?
That's a good question. Echo, pre-echo. I didn't think about that. What he's mentioning is, you know, when you store this tape, you've got magnetized row of stuff. Now you've concentrated it. And if it's, I suppose, tight enough and whatever, you can actually get what they call bleed through. Is you can get a, let's say, a real loud portion in this little piece of tape that can go up and conceivably over a long period of time magnetize a thing. So when you're doing it, you'll hear pre-echo. You'll hear just a little bit, but one turn around from where the actual thing is recorded on it, you'll hear something there. I can't say my own self. I haven't heard anything that's been really objectionable. I know there's probably some of that stuff there, but I would say that's kind of overrated in my book. Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying on the print through or echo, thermal change. Keep your tapes the same temperature and you'll get less.
That's a good point. Of course, it would be nice too. You know, you like maybe play them every so often. You know, I just realized I have a few that I haven't played in a while. So this winter, this fall, I'm going to just go through and play them all. Because you know, you go do that, and it's going to get restacked on the reel a little bit different.
4-track tapes, you just play both sides and you're back to the front, so you don't even.
That's true. You know, of course, the whole idea with quarter track was that they, as a tape head technology, they could actually get more precision than the tape head. But it took them until the late 50s to be able to do that, and they got the quarter track heads. Of course, now they automatically double the playing time. You play the tape in one direction, flip it over, play it back. You got 30 minutes instead of 15 minutes or whatever. But of course, you get that reduced track width, and your signal to noise ratio is going to suffer a little bit, and you know, dynamic range and stuff like that. However, and this is the thing, I'm not sure really if anybody has gone through and started cataloging any of this stuff and how it sounds, but I've heard, you know, some of the early Epic, some of the classical Epic, some of that stuff with, I think that has, you know, has some of the few things have George Zell on it and whatever. There's some really nice stuff there. But the important thing there, if you're into rock, that's where you're going to be able to get your, you know, the only place you're going to be able to get pre-recorded tape, pre-recorded rock is on quarter track stuff. Sure.
Why do you store your tapes vertically rather than horizontally?
Sorry?
Why do you store your tapes vertically rather than horizontally?
Beats the hell out of me. Okay, why do you store tapes? You know, so help me out with this. I mean, I guess they can actually compress, and you could, you know, if the reels are any good, the tape should stay. I'm not going to say if over time you might get the tape actually sagging. You know, the periphery of the tape actually sagging down due to gravity. It's just I've always read that you know, it makes more sense to store them vertically than you know, laying one on top of the other. You're going to screw up the, you know, if you have pre-records, you're certainly going to probably have more of a chance of damaging the covers and all this and that of the you know, the nice labels on the pre-records.
Wound tight, you think it would drop too. Yeah.
That's true. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Are you under the impression or belief that the natural compression that happens in the tape amplifies the in-order harmonics, and that's more pleasing to your ear than vinyl?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't, you know, of course that if you play back the machine, if you play back a tape on the same machine it was recorded on, you're going to be getting a complementary effect there. But as far as any whether or not there's an odd order, even order, mixing, adding, or whatever, I never really thought about that. I don't really know if I have to think on that.
I worked in a recording studio for a long time. We always slammed everything to the 2-track Studers, and it just sounded tons better than when we put it to anything else.
I'll tell you, and I've heard this
compression. You couldn't make that happen with the 2 amplifiers or 2 compressors or anything. It had to be slammed to tape, and that's.
I know a lot of recording engineers do. I'll tell you, I don't know how many people have told me they take their CD. They have a duping deck. They'll actually record their CDs onto the tape, play back the tape. They love this. They love the stuff coming off the tape much better than the CD. I honestly think there's probably some high pass filter. low-pass filtering effect going on in there, and it's maybe some of the higher stuff that's actually that would get through on your system, whatever is actually being rolled off on the tape. So that may have something to do with it. But it's why should that be? I don't know. But I heard it today. A lot of folk, somebody was talking to me about this stuff.
What is the frequency response of tape generally?
Oh, I can get, well, when I align, so I can get 20 to 20K within a dB and a half. I'm not.
Does it roll off after 20K?
Well, unfortunately, in some cases it actually increases a bit. There's a bump, and then it goes on. I can't see. The good news is I'm old. I can't hear above 12, so I don't care what anybody. I don't care. I can hear to 10. I can sense 12, but it's it's really helping me in the tweeter mode. Yeah.
When does tape head wear become a factor? Some
Oh.
of the heads are softer than others too.
Thank you. Tape head wear. You buy a machine today, it has no minimal wear on the heads. It will outlast you, unless you happen to play this stuff 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's the way I look at it. This whole thing, I think, on wear, it was all. I mean, you get all these commercial machines that were in use, like I said, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Sure, you get 6, 8, 10, 12 months on these things. The heads are shot, but of course, and somebody had this thing. You look at the pro heads; they have a little added extra ridge, a little added extra bump where the gap actually is on a lot of these, and so they were made to be relapped 2-3 times before they become unusable. Most of your commercial heads or whatever, you're probably lucky. Well, it depends. If they're really worn, they may not be able to relap them, but if they're medium worn, you could probably relap them once. Remember, and I don't really know on hours, but you've got to be talking, let's say, I'll just throw out a number. A head will last 2,000 hours, and then you got to go do something with it. You let me know how many thousands of hours you go putting on the stuff you're doing. I don't think that's an issue. Trick is to try and get your deck or whatever with the heads and try to get them that are as clean or as minimal wear on them to begin with. Then forget about it. Okay, what do I say? I said, what is it? Keep your heads clean and your tails out, and enjoy the rest of the show.